You see these glowing blue dials, the brushed aluminum, the unmistakable Marantz, Pioneer, Sansui logos. The holy grail of 70s hi-fi, right? Everybody tells you to buy them, but what if I told you you're making a mistake? A costly mistake. Today I'm busting the myth of the golden age big three. I'm going to show you why you should avoid the household names and instead hunt for the true hidden gems, the off-brands like Lafayette and Realistic, that will give you all the performance of the name brands, but at sometimes 1/5 the price. I have years of experience collecting this equipment, repairing this equipment, and comparing this equipment. That experience is going to save you money. Marantz, Pioneer, Sansui, they're legendary for a reason. They made incredible gear. I've got a bunch of it. But their success, their iconic status has created a big three tax. You're paying a premium not for the sound, but for the name brand, the nostalgia, and the perceived collector's value. To show you the huge difference in price between various brands of vintage receivers, I've picked two from my collection. One is the Lafayette LR9090, and the other is a Pioneer SX1050, because I think they match up pretty well. The Pioneer is rated at 120 watts per channel, the Lafayette at 90, so the Pioneer is a little bit more powerful, but feature for feature, they're very close to each other, and they're really a good representation of the late 1970s. They were both manufactured at the same time, and they both have that classic vintage receiver look. I did some research up on eBay, and I think eBay is a great spot for anybody looking for vintage audio equipment because you can find just about everything up there, and you can get an idea of what a full retail price is going to run you for that particular piece of equipment. Up here on eBay, did a search on the Lafayette LR9090 stereo receiver. Now you look at this one here, $195. It says parts only, workable condition. And you go down here to the description, it does work, however, there's an issue that spits out static while playing, whether you're using a CD player, cell phone, a tuner, does not matter. Well, it just sounds like dirty controls that they all have. That's what it sounds like. I'm not saying that's what it is, but here it's $195. I mean, $200. Are you going to get a Marantz, a Pioneer, a Sansui for $200? Let's take a look at the Pioneer SX1050. So the 1050, we do a search, and quite a difference in price, as you can see right off the bat. $1,675, $1,800, $1,300. No bids yet. It's an auction. $1,800. $2,195, $2,150. Most of these prices are 5 to 10 times what the LR9090 is. Let's just go to sold, and these are parts. Here's one, a parts unit sold for $14.95. Let's just take a look and see what it says. Power untested, front glass and tuning knob need to be replaced. Look at the photos for reference. Due to the tuner knob damage and possible other reasons, unit does not function properly. It will not stay tuned to station. Sound quality is also less than ideal. Unit in need of major servicing. And it sells for $1,400. Not asking price, the selling price. So let's keep going down here. Here's another one that sold for $1,700. In great shape, one owner who took amazing care of their stereo, unfortunately passed away, was regularly clean, kept out, climate controlled condition, a little better electric clean, but functioned great. So it needs to have its controls cleaned. In this unit, cleaning those controls properly is a bit of a job. I think you guys get the idea. The SX1050 is a lot more expensive than an LR9090. Over $1,000 more expensive, just for the badge. Is the 1050 that much better than the 9090? I'm going to talk about that as we move ahead. First, let's go back to when these two receivers were new. When these two pieces were new in the late 70s, they were much closer together at a price point. The 1050 was priced a little bit higher than the 9090. The 1050 retailed for $700 to $750, and the 9090 retailed for $600, although both could be found substantially cheaper if you shopped around, local sales or by mail order. Many of you guys probably remember the high fidelity ads or the stereo review ads from these out-of-state retailers, which listed prices which many times were lower than your local stores. Here's a secret that isn't a secret. In the 1970s, many of these off-brands were manufactured in the same factories that brands like Pioneer, Kenwood, Sansui, and Marantz were manufactured in, and they're often using very similar designs and components. The audio industry was booming, and there was fierce competition, and brands like Lafayette would get companies like Trio, which later became Kenwood, to build their models. Another company, Planet Research, was a big OEM manufacturer in Japan, and even there's some conjecture that Luxman was involved with some Lafayette products. It's really a guessing game of who made what for who. These OEMs were producing receivers that were often technically sophisticated and incredibly robust. If this Lafayette LR9090 was a piece of junk, it wouldn't be here. That's why it's in this video. It's 50 years old, just like this Pioneer product. They weren't cutting corners. They were just being less aggressively marketed. Think about Lafayette. They could only sell them in one place, their store. So the distribution model was completely different between Lafayette and Pioneer. A moment ago, I showed you some images of the LR9090 internally. I wanted to show you the high quality parts that were used in the 9090, the same brands that were used by Pioneer, Marantz, and Sansui back in the day. Omron relays, ELP switches, Elna circuit boards and capacitors, Mitsubishi resistors. These top quality parts are why this receiver is still going today. And because this 9090 uses discrete components that are serviceable and repairable, they're just like their famous counterparts. They can be repaired. And I'm not talking down the SX1050. It is a tremendous receiver. It has so much in common with its big brother, the SX1980. The 1980's got a lot more power, but honestly, guys, do you need more than 120 watts a channel? Of course not, but sometimes you just want it. My only problem with the SX1050 is what they cost nowadays. And the question always seems to come up, well, how do they sound? How do they compare to each other? They sound very similar to me. I really wouldn't want to do an A/B test between them. As far as I'm concerned, the Lafayette sounds just as good as the Pioneer. So where do you find a receiver like the LR9090? What should you expect, and how do you buy smart? As you already saw, they're up on eBay. That's the easiest, the quickest, but probably the most expensive way to find a receiver like an LR9090. We saw that one that was up there, $200. The problem is $110 to ship it. There's the downside to eBay, the shipping costs. Facebook Marketplace, Craigslist, those are two viable options. You got the advantage, you go see it, you can touch it anyways. eBay, you can't see it or anything, and you don't have to pay shipping charges. So that's a possibility. But the downside to that is you got to keep looking and keep looking and keep looking, because most likely you're not going to find what you want the first time you look. Then you've got the thrift stores, the flea markets, and you've probably got even less of a chance of finding what you want. No matter where you find your new receiver, expect it to be a little bit dirty. Expect it to have scratchy controls that you're going to have to clean up. As you saw from this video, you're not saving hundreds, you're saving well over $1,000 if you can find an off-brand like this Lafayette LR9090 compared to a more known brand like Pioneer, Marantz, or Sansui. For you guys who aren't comfortable working on the equipment yourself, there's a little bit of money you can put toward having it professionally serviced if you need to. When you're out there shopping for your new receiver, test it the best you can. Obviously, if you buy it out in a field with no electric, you just buy it as is. But if you go over to somebody's house and you're auditioning it, take your time, make sure what you're getting into before you buy it. The difference in value is simply undeniable. You're getting the heart of that golden age sound, the build quality, and the aesthetics without the inflated price tag. And keep a lookout for Radio Shack's Realistic brand. They built several outstanding receivers through the years in that 50 watt to 120 watt range. The STA 2000, 2100, 2200, 2300, 2080. I don't know, I can't remember all the numbers, but they had several of them. They were just like Lafayette. They had a Japanese OEM manufacturer make their equipment. And Radio Shack got a bad name because they did have some cheap junk, but they also had some high quality equipment that would stand up to any of the Japanese manufacturers. You can even look at some secondary manufacturers like Kenwood, JVC, Rotel that don't get the following that the Marantzes and the Pioneers or the Sansuis get. But I can't really recommend those either because they have just gotten outrageously priced. I just think your best bet is staying with the off-brands, the ones that nobody wanted, and to some extent today, nobody still wants. Look at that eBay listing I showed you earlier. I know if I lived in Queens, which is where Ozone Park is, I'd give the guy $200 for it. And if he's selling it on eBay with the fees and PayPal fees, he'd take $150 for it. But I don't care. I'd give him $200 for it. I don't care if I've already got one. I think the Lafayette LR 9090 is that good of a receiver. I just don't think the prices have caught up to a receiver like the 9090. Either the mainstream Pioneers, Sansuis, Marantzes of the world have got to come way down in price, or a receiver like this 9090 is going to go way up in price. Because in this market right now, you can put together a nice little, at least 3-piece system with the Lafayette 9090, a turntable, a good cartridge, and a nice pair of vintage speakers for $1,500. And as you've seen, that's the bare minimum that an SX 1050 is going to cost you, and it's more likely going to cost you closer to $2,000. For me, a system made up with that 9090 is a far better value than an SX 1050 by itself. As a collector and also a person who repairs his own equipment, I just wanted you guys to be aware that the off-brands offer a very good bargain in today's market. If this were 20 years ago and you could pick up this 1050 for $100 and you could pick up the Lafayette 9090 for $20, you'd probably leave the Lafayette behind because the Pioneer was so inexpensive. Well, that's just not how it is anymore. Things have gotten skewed off too much. Either the Pioneers and the Marantzes and Sansuis are too expensive, or the off-brands are too cheap. I'm not sure which it is, but the name brands either need to come down or the off-brands need to go up. So the next time you're looking for a piece of vintage equipment, whether it's online or it's somewhere local, like a local store or your local flea market, wherever it is, don't overlook the Realistics and the Lafayettes of the world. You might just find your favorite new piece of vintage equipment, save hundreds of dollars, and build a system that sounds just as good as the one that cost you several times as much. What do you guys think? Do you think like I do, that really the off-brand equipment's the way to go today? And have you ever scored on an off-brand piece of equipment that really surprised you, that you didn't have much hope for, but all of a sudden you got it home and you thought, this thing isn't half bad? Tell me about it in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And for my present subscribers, as always, thank you so much for watching. Y'all have a good day.